we're good to go.
All right. Ready to go? Cheers. All right. So we got decentralized thought today and the Beach Boys. We're going to kind of talk a little bit about the differences of what's been going on with ABC, SV, the end-chain kind of differences. And recently, the reason that we're having this discussion is because there was a little bit of a disagreement in a
can I clarify? Let me clarify. Can I clarify? Because
okay.
The reason why this came up, because I feel bad that this was like put out this way, but what happened was I had said in a Telegram group, I said specifically, Decentralized doesn't know what he's talking about, and I want to clarify that I was talking specifically about the coin splitting. I actually am very against the coin splitting aspect of things. And I know that that's something that we'll talk about a lot today. But I do want to get out of the way. Like I'm not just kissing your ass. Like you made, like when you put out, first of all, the Dash video you put out is awesome. The Lightning Network videos, all that kind of stuff. I'm a big fan of the stuff that you've been putting out. So I don't want you to think that I was attacking you. I was specifically talking about the coin splitting piece, which I do think I do stand by my statement that I disagree very strongly with the coin splitting video you put out, but we can get to that. But I do want to get that out of the way because I hope that wasn't necessarily taken out of context. And then I also said, I did say this, but this wasn't necessarily referring to you. I said, I hope these idiots hold responsibility if people lose money. And I meant that just very generally about, I can see how that might be taken personally, so I will apologize for the wording, but I mean that very generally. I actually do very strongly believe that people advocating for coin splitting without telling people that there's a very strong possibility that they'll lose all of their money in some capacity. But I know that's what we'll get to, but I do want to get that out of the way because I said that stuff, and I know that's what prompted this debate discussion. Right. So I want to get that out of the way off the bat. But I'm going to fanboy on you a little bit. I thought I sent your videos, especially about the Lightning Network, to people, and they were just like, "What the hell is the Lightning Network?" Like it blew their mind. So thank you.
Yeah. Appreciate it, man. Yeah, I didn't take it personally. It's Ash that sent it to me, and he was, forwarded it over, and I was like, I'm just gonna go over there and say hi because I haven't really bumped into y'all much.
Well, I'm glad we're doing this. I think that this is maybe the first, aside from I guess when Ryan and Omri talked, I don't think there's been kind of like a discussion across the aisles or whatever. So I'm excited. Yeah. So.
Yeah, definitely.
So I guess we'll talk about the split first.
Yeah. So, what do y'all think? It's kind of crazy out there.
How about we just start with just like why do you clearly are aligned with the ABC side. So why are you aligned on that aisle? Yeah.
Several different reasons. Specifically, the video that I put out that you're talking about coin splitting was because Ryan's videos, Ryan X Charles, lately, I've kind of taken issue with them. I think a lot of them kind of misguide people and misrepresent a lot of terms. A lot of things he says do not meet the criteria of the definitions. And so, started making a couple videos about that. But on a broader sense, I think it's easier for somebody to say why they align with SV because, in my opinion, there's not any improvements that I see. So at the very base level, it's more of, well, let's just keep on going where we're going. They're doing fine. I agree with the changes that are being made, and I don't see anything on the SV side that particularly draws me that way.
Sure. I guess we'll get my side of the way and then we can go from there. I won't even mention the ABC side for now. We can talk about those changes, but I will just say, you just said specifically, like, I think we should keep going where we're going. I think that is what the SV side is doing. I think, for example, I think, so there's a few things that they're doing that I'm actually very much in favor of. I've talked with Clemens Lay a lot about his tokenization solution. Mm-hmm. I very much am happy that they are, number one, looking at removing the script limit entirely. And I also think that the idea of non-standard scripts is an issue. So that the whole, I guess number one, them re-enabling the opcodes. I think I don't see anything controversial about doing that. In fact, ABC is doing that in May. So doesn't appear to be anything controversial about re-enabling the opcodes. I find it a little interesting that their spec was submitted on time. So that I think what keyed me into this originally, that this was political, was that their spec for the re-enabled opcodes was submitted in time. So that to me was it felt like this became political very quickly right after August,
right.
August 15th or whatever. So that just generally bothered me. But then also, I wholeheartedly believe that increasing the block size is not like everyone said. There was a lot of people saying 21 megabytes is too big. That we couldn't go past 21 megabytes. That in some capacity was disproven this past weekend. I know that some people will complain. I know. Yeah, maybe not. I think that I don't think the base software not being able to handle X block size doesn't justify not increasing it, because I think it should be a competitive layer to get higher block sizes than your competitors, and I think that's what we're seeing already happen, and I think that's what we'll continue to see as the software scales. I guess we're going a little bit off topic, but I guess just generally, I think the SV side is the conservative side, actually. I think that you said we should keep doing what we're doing. I completely agree with that. I think that canonical transaction ordering and DSV are actually large changes. I don't think that they, I think that would be in my opinion, controversial change. It's not the conservative change. I think the conservative route is doing what we're doing safely. The changes are relatively quote unquote boring to the larger cryptocurrency world. I don't think that's an issue. But
yeah, let's be honest. I mean, like you said, political. 99% of this is political. I don't think that either side's changes are mandatory. I think the CTOR is a good thing to do, and I think we should probably do it now. I think that the protocol needs to be stabilized, and any changes that allow for larger scale long term, better sooner rather than later. Each protocol change as time goes on, the cost kind of rises exponentially. So I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot of disagreements. I think a lot of this is like personalities and leadership more than anything. There is one thing though about you said about raising the block size. I don't see. I keep seeing the argument. And when I say keep seeing the argument, I'm talking about social media, Twitter,
right.
Reddit. I mean, a lot of people talk about how raising the block size to 128 is, needed for scale. I entirely disagree. Our average block size is 70 kilobytes, maybe something like that. I don't think we've ever reached a megabyte without, some sort of stress test going. We did reach some 32 megabyte blocks. Was it yesterday or the day before? But there's a big difference between throwing out, a 32 megabyte block after 70 megabyte block and having sustained 32 megabyte blocks. You have a kind of a lot of different attack vectors can happen that way. And, 128 megabytes, raising that without any need for it, even close, raises attack vectors. And people can do poison blocks, which I'm sure we'll see some of those here shortly.
Have you heard Steve Shatters' opinion on the poison block attack?
Steve Shatters.
So, I mean, his opinion, and I haven't heard, I've talked with some miners, I've talked with other developers. This seems reasonable that the poison block attack is something easily mitigated by miners. So I think there's two things what you just said. I think number one, and this is something Craig Wright himself brought up a while back, was that money isn't fluid, right? So you don't necessarily need sustained 32 megabyte blocks to justify raising the block size to 32 megabytes. If you have one 32 megabyte block at a high volume of traffic at one point in the day, that would in some capacity justify having a 32 megabyte block size, number one, right? But then number two, I don't think, from the sounds of it, and I haven't necessarily heard a good rebuttal to this, and we talked about this, if you are interested, when we interviewed Steve and Daniel, he said specifically, it seems like the poison block attack is something you can easily mitigate, because if you are expecting an X megabyte block, is actually very trivial to understand whether you're receiving more than that amount of data, either in the header or in the peer-to-peer message. And I think that's what, I don't know. I'm just curious. I'd be curious if we see a poison block attack, because it sounds like it's pretty easily mitigated, from what I've understood.
I mean, this is kind of getting a little bit off topic, but you know, going towards it. But you know, what do y'all think about the Satoshi shotgun that's supposedly going to be unveiled? I would say that would fall under a poison block attack. So I think we'll be able to see on the 15th whether that is an effective attack method or not.
I think it's interesting that the side that is saying, and I'm not talking about you, I'm just saying in general, there's a side that is saying that the SV side is against the idea of permissionlessness. And then to say that something like people paying to make those transactions shouldn't be allowed to do it. So I think that is the definition of permissionless, right? And if,
I mean, people can do it, people can feel free to attack. I think there's a difference, you know, kind of equating that to the core versus, you know, large blockers a while back calling smaller transactions spam, and somebody loading up a stress test on purpose for the purpose of knocking nodes off. I think there's a little bit of a difference there.
I think there's value, but I think there's value in, like, for example, I think that there's value in understanding, like, for example, the past weekend was the first time we actually knew, okay, a 32 megabyte block could be put into the blockchain. That was the first time in reality we've ever understood, okay, that is now technically possible, it's feasible. According to, I think Craig himself said it, we will see a 128 megabyte block mined with the stress test on the 17th. If that's true, doesn't that open it up to businesses to say, like, I think the scaling problem is in some ways a chicken and egg problem as well. I think that, it's, what is it? The London gold market, one day of the London gold market would require like 30 gigabyte blocks or something like that, the gold trading market. So I think it is kind of a chicken and egg problem. If you don't have the scale, you're not going to have real usage. I do agree with you though. I think obviously that it makes a better case to scale when you have usage.
Right.
But I still think, I do think it is a chicken and egg problem. I think that, for example, I mean, Calvin Ayre himself he owns Bodog or whatever. I don't think you could probably put a day's worth of online poker transactions on the BCH chain today and actually have them settle in a day, unless I'm mistaken. I don't think we have enough volume for that even, right? So, yeah.
A lot of people seem to think that larger blocks will attract business in some way, but you know, we already have scheduled hard forks every 6 months. So if, say, a business was about to put Bitcoin Cash, you know, build the infrastructure for it, these things take time and will certainly take more than 6 months. Anybody that kind of says, no, you know, we need 128 megabyte blocks now, I usually ask them, you know, to make a small bet, you know, of how large the blocks will actually be on a regular basis before May next year on the second hard fork. Because it's nice to believe that we would need it by then, but the facts are, if there were 2 megabyte blocks on Bitcoin back in December, there never would have been a problem. Never. So in 10 years of usage on the most used and most secured coin, with the biggest network and the biggest merchant, you know, user base, if they couldn't break a 2 megabyte block after 10 years, I really doubt that we're going to break 32 megabytes in the next 6 months.
But I think you still hit the same problem. You hit the same problem of people. I mean, how many things were kicked off of the core network before you even had the chance to touch 2 megs, right? I mean, there were so many projects like Ethereum, for example, that was discouraged from even building on top of Bitcoin because of the limit, right? So,
well, let's be clear. They were wanting extension blocks. So extension blocks aren't in, you know, version 0.1. So
sure. Okay, you're right. I think the block size thing. You're right. There's no way anyone can predict the future. We can.
It's an arbitrary number, and that's the thing. And it's not even a block size limit. It is changing the
Right.
the default config of the actual node. All node implementations in Bitcoin Cash have a configurable block size. So saying that you're raising the block size limit to 128, you're not. You're raising the default configuration, which anyone can do at any time. So there are no more block size increases. There are only people raising the limit as the limit's needed. The block size debate is over.
I think you're right. I agree. It is configurable. I think that's something that also gets lost in the politics of it, is that ABC right now, it's configurable in the ABC client. I know the SV people said it was behind. It should be easier to configure, but that's, I think, a UI problem. It's not necessarily, I think you're right. I think no matter what, if you're on ABC, you can still raise the limit higher. So,
I mean, aren't most miners on less than 8 megabytes right now?
I wonder how much that's changed recently, but I think you're right. Yeah.
Well, at least the last the stress test when they all got kicked off for it.
Yeah.
I don't know what they did after that, but
yeah.
So the whole block size thing, I find a lot of these arguments are like that are kind of unsubstantiated. It just kind of goes argument to argument to argument. I've been, since this first started, I've been pro ABC, and just full disclosure, I mean, I do know some of the ABC guys. I like them. I have met Craig, but they would be less in my social circle than, the people around ABC. So, but
maybe, are you, sorry, did I cut you off there?
No, go for it.
I was just I think we kind of came to an agreement on the block size and it being configurable, but I like to kind of pivot that into the block reward that having coming up in 2020. And what are your thoughts on, as we approach that limit and trying to get adoption, and how that might affect the incentivization process of mining? Do you see any, I guess, how those can go hand in hand, and how a limit in the block size and transaction fees going through, how that might somehow cause a limit in the future?
Well, like we just said, I don't think there is a limit.
Right.
The question there, and correct me if I'm wrong, is do I think that a larger block size, like configuration, would attract more business before the halving?
Yeah. And
No,
do you see that as a necessary component for us to start shooting for?
I don't think so, because I think any business that is doing their research would realize that there's a configurable block size, and we can accommodate as much traffic as they can give.
Well, I think the only thing I add there is that it's clear right now that the majority of miners, there's a very small subsect of miners that can handle 32 to hypothetically 128. So I think the only reason why I guess I would be for the stress test and all that kind of stuff is it does help, I would hope, maybe give a kick to smaller miners to help them understand you need better hardware, you need better software in some capacity to handle larger block sizes if that were to come tomorrow. Otherwise, you are handing the network to the top 2 miners or 3 miners.
A lot of this can't be, it's not just about hardware necessarily. You've got geographical limitations. The Great Wall of China is a big issue. Yep. And speaking of, if you send out large blocks and they're not compressed in a well manner, you get a lot of centralization just in China. So, I mean, if we had 32 megabyte blocks right now, every miner outside of China would have to switch to BTC in mine, because they would not be able to keep up with the Chinese miners. They would receive the blocks way after the Chinese miners got it, and the Chinese miners would be effectively, not purposely, but they would be selfish mining by accident, say. So, I mean, there are issues like that, and that's why CTOR is being implemented. It's because these are real world problems, and you can't just say, compete, because competition is moving to China and getting inside that firewall and connecting directly to the Chinese miners. and not getting your blocks late, not having your blocks propagate slower to the Chinese miners. I mean, almost all of the mining is in China, so I mean it's a slight problem right now. But as things get higher, better hardware isn't going to fix that. Better software will.
Isn't the assumption there that the majority of mining is in China? And that may be true right now, but is that going to be true in a year, 2 years?
Well, if the blocks get larger, it's going to get worse.
Okay.
And because as the blocks get larger, it takes more data to send outside of China. Since most of them are in China right now, they receive the blocks first. And then the blocks have to go to everyone outside of China. Everyone outside of China has to get their blocks it has to pass through the Chinese firewall. It gets out there slowly, goes to the miners, and any miner outside of that firewall, if they find a block, have to transmit it back into China, where most of the miners are, before the miners in China find a block themselves and propagate it to themselves faster. So unless you compress the blocks properly, the Chinese miners end up effectively selfish mining everyone outside of China.
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying, if the majority of mining ends up outside of China, or the majority of mining capable of mining large blocks, for example, is outside of China, then that may not be true. But I think
have like 70 to 90% of mining inside China.
Yeah, right now. Yeah, I agree. I think you make a fair point for sure. I think we should move away from block size. I think this is a very boring discussion to people who are big blockers at heart, right?
Right.
So I think you make good points about the firewall. I think that's a very interesting problem to solve. I'm curious.
Yeah. So if you have CTOR and you're able to have your graphene blocks a seventh of the size, you can propagate them faster and eliminate that problem.
Yeah. I guess we can talk about ordering. I think the ordering part, I don't really have a great opinion one way or the other on it. I think I see the argument for canonical transaction ordering. I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I think one thing, Clemens Lay, I really like Clemens Lay. I've talked to him a lot. He wrote an article today I just read that I thought was interesting. One quote he made that was very interesting. And this, I think, is a byproduct of the 6 month. We have to, put changes in every 6 months. I think the one part of it that I would agree with him, and this is speaking as someone who, again, I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. He said, we're going to have to potentially, if this all works out, this whole Bitcoin thing becomes a thing, we're going to have to tell our grandchildren why we made the decision we did today. And as someone who, I definitely am on the high sides of things, I don't know if, I think all changes have unintended consequences in the end. I'm not convinced that this change has, from the people even I respect that are outside of the SV camp, there's a lot of people that find this contentious. Again, I'm not too on. Right. Go for it. Yeah, because I'm not.
There's a situation, and everyone's gonna just blast me for this because, mind you, everyone likes Bitcoin Unlimited. They got good tech, they got cool people, but I mean, contentious. I would say it's more of a competition within itself. Bitcoin Unlimited is more of a social club, and it's who can get the best tech and who can prove that somebody else's tech is shit. So you have a little collaboration and more of people just trying to one up each other. And you could always one up each other and talk shit, and I don't see much. They obviously do a lot, but there's a certain aspect of that that's just trying to be a little bit adversarial, I guess, or competitive. But I don't see many. The people that are opposing. What just happened? Are y'all still there?
I still see you. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know what happened. But the people that are not people, but the arguments against CTOR, everything that I've seen is either not technical or it's weak. When you compare it to changes, like SegWit or something that's actually contentious, these are more of minor, like, oh, yeah, but you could kind of, I mean, if somebody were to take the same fine-tooth comb and try to scrutinize, topological transaction ordering, it would be way, way worse. So, you can try and pick a flaw out of anything and you'll find it. But,
Sure.
if people were to switch that and do the current ordering, I would say they would find a lot more flaws.
Sure. Yeah, I don't have an opinion on there. Let's move to the last part of the changes, and then we can maybe get into the split aspect of things. I think that's where things get interesting. But I do think one of the things that I wrote something specifically in response to Roger, because what I found interesting about Roger's video he put up about I actually didn't even care that much about DataSig Verify. I think I cared more that that there was contention. I cared more that there was contention and it was still being kind of hardline stood behind more than anything else. But then what I found very interesting is when Roger made his video specifically about the November fork, he pretty much admitted that the DSV opcode had legal question marks around it, I guess, with respect to how it affected the base protocol. Yeah. Sorry.
Are you talking about his video that he released, or?
Yeah, the video he put up where he said it was his thoughts on the November hard fork, and he pretty much implied that the reason why he was opposed to, or maybe why he backed the ABC changes, that he believed in this idea of permissionlessness. The permissionlessness buzzword, I guess, has kind of been thrown around a lot. I actually don't think Bitcoin is permissionless. We can talk about that on its own, but what I found interesting is that, because Craig's whole argument right now is that DataSig Verify enables, bucket shops, and it allows at the base protocol level illegal gambling, and it allows questionable legal use cases that he claims would then hold miners to right now miners are common carriers under law. This would make them something else. Publishers. It would make them publishers, I think, instead of common carriers. Roger's video seemed to kind of be like, yeah, but screw governments and we don't care. I've noticed that I know a lot of the ABC developers are like kind of anarchists at heart, which is fine. I don't care. But the DataSig Verify stuff, to me, while I didn't necessarily, number one, I found it very odd that the Keyport developers put out an Oracle for the FIFA World Cup months ago. No one paid attention to it. No one talked about it, really. We talked about it. That's about it. I mean, there's other people that talked about it, obviously, but and then now the use case of the DSV was oracles, and I was like, well, we had oracles working. I thought Ryan's video about the subsidy, thought that was actually a pretty valid argument. I didn't. I can maybe see both sides of it, but I thought his argument that we should maybe try it in script and then see if the miners decide to subsidize it later. I think that's a valid argument. But then the legal aspect, to me, it seemed like Roger was admitting in his video that there might be legal objections to putting this into Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is permissionless and it stands for freedom, and therefore we don't care. And that also kind of bothered me. But I don't know if you have an opinion one way or the other on DataSig Verify, but I do find it contentious, and that's why I'm a little frustrated. I think
right.
Yeah.
Well, I will put Craig's claim about DataSig Verify being a legal, problem up there with his statement earlier about SegWit being a legal problem, as well as everything that isn't his being a legal problem. I mean, there's been at least, I wish somebody would put together a list of legal of this. But of course, nothing's ever come from it, and I don't think anyone will. I'm not sure who you would even prosecute in a case like that, if DSV were to be used, and whether if something's there versus that really doesn't say. I don't think that has any bearing versus what the person chooses to do with something. It's not there just to do illegal gambling. It's not like illegal gambling comes in the ABC node pack. It's not right there. So, I mean, I think it's a non-issue in that manner. Honestly, I don't find DSV incredibly interesting I mean, it seems very simple. It seems to have simple use cases, nothing absolutely groundbreaking, but I don't really see any valid arguments against it. I mean, I saw Ryan X. Charles's video about, looping a script roughly 1 million times. I would say, he said it might cost $5 to do that versus, one, I don't know how much it normally costs, one Satoshi.
Yeah.
You talked about subsidies. What if you loop the script and miners, it's not worth it for anyone, so miners literally have to subsidize it and charge $2.50. That's a real subsidy. Whereas if you start the base price at the bottom and then let the miners choose the price up from there, it's not a subsidy. It's letting the market decide, because the miners will pick the price that suits them. But if you do that with the looping script, it actually is a subsidy. So you start at the bottom and then you price up. You don't price up and then lower the price to subsidize it. I mean, that's all really I have to say about DSV. I mean, it's got the only other thing I can really think of that's useful, I like the zero comp idea, the forfeit transactions. I think that's pretty cool. Probably not super needed. I've never had a zero comp transaction not go through at the moment, but
Sure.
I guess that's really all I have to say about DSV.
Sure. I think we covered, both sides there, but maybe let's bring it into splits, right? Because data stake verify is the mechanism, I guess, that will supposedly be used to implement replay protection, opt-in replay protection for the upcoming split. So for anyone that hasn't watched, you made a video about split transactions, so I think that your thoughts on there is kind of in there, but maybe do you want to summarize how you envision this split working if you do want to opt into splitting? And
right. So basically, to give like the TLDR, whenever a split happens without replay protection, initially all the coins are replayed on both chains, especially if you have parties in the middle like Money Button that are forwarding the transactions themselves. Some people call it split protection. Most people call it replay attacks. But the system is inherently unstable. For one, after 100 blocks and the mined blocks start coming through, every time somebody makes a transaction and combines an input from a mined block, a new Coinbase transaction, that then becomes split, and it just spreads through the network as inputs are combined into outputs and split repeatedly going through. And that's along with anyone that uses opt-in replay protection, which is, just using an opcode that's not valid on the other chain. And I use DSV in the example because it's the easiest way to do it. But I mean, you can use opmul on the SV side if you wanted to. So there's kind of this narrative that we should keep the transactions replayed, and blacklist all transactions that are not replayable. And we'll just throw this in there. My video is. This is mostly towards Ryan because it was in the video, but he talks about holding them in split transactions in stasis and some odd things like that. And I think it for one, nothing's ready for that. You'd have to have wallet software across the board, blacklisting all split transactions, monitoring all incoming outputs. You would have to blacklist all block rewards. So I'd like to see about, how the miners plan to profit if their coins aren't usable, even if it went through a widespread across the board in the industry. The miners are kind of out of luck. It raises a lot of problems with fungibility. And I mean, all in all, I do not see how it could possibly work. It seems to me that if there was a hash war, that it should be done within 100 blocks one day. And that would allow for people to, even if they didn't use opt-in replay protection, it's fair game. But after that, the miners need to pay for their mining equipment. Those coins need to be in circulation. So I don't see an answer.
Sure. All right. So yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So that was my video. So I'd like to hear kind of why you call bullshit.
Okay. So I think where to begin? So I think the biggest issue I have, I guess the reason why I think Ryan's video, I understood you took, from what I kind of gather, I think you took an issue with the way he said the word like poison, right? Poison transaction.
No.
Okay.
We can talk. Let me talk about that after you make your point, though.
Okay. Yeah. I think that for the most part, my issue with the idea of splits, like I think, for example, number one, I disagree with you that the hash war should only be played out to 100 blocks, for example. I think that the white paper, and this is something we've gotten, and I mean, people have argued with us about a lot. I mean, the white paper seems pretty explicit to me that the hash war is how you resolve the incompatible rule sets. Everyone keeps saying, I don't know where this idea came from. I know that Jonathan Tooman brought it up in the ABC Q&A. I don't know where it originated from, if it was from him, but he said Nakamoto consensus isn't valid across incompatible rule sets. And that to me is like, I mean, the last sentence of the white paper is any needed rules and incentives can be enforced with this consensus mechanism. So I actually don't think that a split is in any way not incompatible with Nakamoto consensus. So that would be number one. I don't want to get too off topic here, but my issue with the idea that you can opt into splitting, I think that this is a rehash of UASF. I actually think that this entire opt-in replay protection is the idea that as users, we can activate a soft fork by opting in with using, let's say, DataSig verify, and therefore somehow we can protect we can now protect the existence of two chains. Craig has outlined that he is going to take DataSig verify transactions, call them illegal, and take them as miner fees. That has caused a shitstorm.
Yeah.
Of all everyone saying like no, we have the right to fork. We have the right to have a separate chain. I think that this is actually the culmination of the biggest lie that Core propagated was that users actually matter at all. And I know that's like it kind of sucks as users to be at whim of this, but really miners can do that. Miners can say, you are a minority chain, we're going to invalidate everything you just did, and we're going to steal your money. Because that's what they get to do as the majority, because they, as the white paper says, any rules and incentives can be enforced this way. So the reason why I'm very, 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 very surprised to see people, and it's not just you, it's actually everyone. Everyone is just saying, we're going to split the coins. Exchanges seem to be somehow on board with this. We're going to split the coins. We're going to use this new opcode that let's hope this new opcode is as safe as everyone says it is. It might be, but let's hope it is. And we're going to use it for opt-in replay protection. We're going to assume that the majority hash power, assuming it is SV in this scenario that we're outlining, is not going to maliciously attack the minority chain, which is all within their right to do so as the majority chain. You may not like it, but as a user, you do not have a say in the matter. And that's my problem. That's why I think that I view this 100% as a rehashed UASF argument. And I wish it wasn't, but that's just how I view it.
Right. I got to back up.
Sure.
My memory's bad. First, I want to say the video did not talk about 100 blocks being kind of within that range. Mm-hmm. There's no like real evidence to support that was ever planned, but it seems like if the argument was to not use opt-in replay protection, to do it within 100 blocks, because at that point you have no choice. It's in the system. It's breaking down now. The replay's gone. It's just going to happen very, very rapidly. So,
how do you mean? Sorry, I might be missing. Like, what do you mean exactly?
About which part?
Like, how do you mean it breaks down? What breaks down exactly? The replay protection?
Yeah. As soon as the chain splits, it's a ticking time bomb. within, it's obviously never happened long enough. You know, the only example I can think of is the Ethereum split, and, you know, they added replay protection at some point. So we don't know exactly how long, but I mean, from the moment of the fork, it's a ticking time bomb, about 1 day to 100 blocks. Once those miners actually get those rewards and those start propagating through the system, everything they touch starts, you know, can't be replayed. And the two separate chains become two separate ledgers. So even if users choose not, I mean, you really can't choose not to. And you said, like, you know, you really hope that this opcode is what they say, you know, because they're splitting with it. I mean, we could use opmule if we want to. I mean, there's plenty of ways to split. This just happens to be the easiest. The other thing about the user activated soft fork, that's kind of, I mean, I think that's kind of bullshit. The whole UASF thing, you know, the miners like chose, like, whoever, if you think that that's a thing, it's not. You don't, but I'm saying generally, like, that, the idea of that, you can't, it's not a thing.
But I mean, what else is this? What else is this? If we're saying that it doesn't matter who has majority hash power, that somehow two chains are going to emerge out of this, how is that going to work out? How is that actually going to work if the majority chain is openly stating we are going to attack the minority chain?
Well, I mean, if they, I would, well, first, before we go on a rant about Nakamoto consensus, I still want to kind of know why in the Telegram chat you said I don't know what I'm talking about, because so far, I mean, that haven't gotten to that yet.
Sure. I think, Connor, your problem is that people could lose money, right?
Yeah, well, that's all I'm getting at, is that everyone is saying, even was it just, I just saw the Bitcoin Cash, what is it, association now? They said in their information about the fork, it listed an entire section about how to split your coins with no disclaimer that there is a chance, if one chain emerges out of this whole process, as described in the white paper, you will lose your money if you use DataSig Verify to opt into replay protection. There's nothing in their announcement, and this is what very much bothers me, is that everyone is saying split your transactions, there's going to be two chains. ABC openly saying there's going to be two chains. Unless they switch the hashing algorithm, which they floated, I don't think there is going to be two chains. And if people do opt in replay protection with DataSig Verify, and Craig and whoever else makes good on their promise to steal those transactions, people are going to lose a lot of money.
Right. Okay. So there's nothing. That's what I was kind of hoping to talk about is, from a technical standpoint, the video is fine. You just, if I would have put a disclaimer about Craig's claims, like I talked in the previous video to Ryan.
Yeah. Let me maybe clarify that one piece. I don't. It's not even that. I guess if I had to clarify why I was saying not knowing what you're talking about, I'm just saying people, at least from the reason why I said it, was because the chat was saying specifically, well, it sounds like there's going to be a split. Did you see his video? I was like, well, it doesn't mean there's going to be a split. It just means that this is what people think this is how a split is going to occur. And I'm saying this doesn't guarantee a split whatsoever. In fact, it might lull people into a false sense of security that a split will occur, and then they're going to lose a lot of money. And that's what bothers me.
Well, there's absolutely going to be a split. It's the only question is, will it persist? Will one attack the other? You know, because if you split your coins, you can't really lose anything. I mean, if you were like a special case and just happened, I don't know how you would even do that. So the only risk is if Craig confiscates everyone's coins who chose to split, and then redistributes them to the miners of his chain, which, let's be honest, we know who is the majority hash rate there, who the coins will go to. So, you know, in any normal 51% attack, a miner cannot rewrite a ledger. They cannot mess with the UTXOs of the users. So I guess my question, what do you mean?
Why can't they?
Well, I mean, they just can't.
But if they're the majority hash rate, they set the rules. That's the way it works.
Well, I mean, they just can't rewrite. I mean, they can't just take people's UTXOs.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry. Yep. Okay. I see what you mean. I thought you meant
Like they can keep people from using them.
Sure.
But under normal circumstances, you can't just say, you know what? Well, we're just going to take this over here and this over here and this. It doesn't work that way. So this particular client is writing in a new rule that says if you disagree or do something, quote, illegal, they're now illegal opcodes, are the exact words that Craig Wright used in his blog post, that they can confiscate your coins and redistribute them back to the owners of the chain. And by owners, I mean the miners, which I mean CoinGeek and nChain. So, I mean, do you think that that's, are you defending that?
I don't think I'm defending the fact that miners decide the rules. And if they are the majority, right. I'm not even saying I shouldn't be forced to defend the actions of what they are saying, we're going to prevent a split. Here's how we're going to prevent a split. Do not. And the reason why I'm equating this to me feels like a potential user-activated soft fork that will end the way the user-activated soft fork could have ended a year ago.
But it's not user-activated. It happens naturally after 100 blocks. You are artificially stepping in there and trying to stop it. That's the point.
Users
the parties, the interference is stopping the replay. That's why it's called a replay attack. Ryan might recall it and call it split protection, but throughout the entire history of Bitcoin and anything that's had to do with this sort of computer industry, and it's always been known as a replay attack. He can rebrand these things all he wants, but that is a replay attack. It's not split protection. He also called a splitting coins and sending one or the other a double spend. That is bullshit. It's not a double spend. If you send that split transaction, is it a triple spend or a quadruple spend?
So he was equating them. So he was saying this is how our wallet would treat it. We would treat it the same as a double spend.
He said that's a double spend. He said how to double spend clueless noobs is you send one on the SV chain and one on the ABC chain, and both two people get BCH, and then you just double spent. And then he actually said that you should go to prison for that. He did say maybe not prison to jail for being a little jackass, but he's giving a legal. He's alluding or outright saying that is an offense, but more than that, he's calling it a double spend, and that is bullshit. Because it's just not technically true. And so I would have loved if he would have answered the questions I answered in my video. I don't know if y'all saw his. I don't even know if y'all saw my video. It didn't get many views. I don't know.
Yeah.
If y'all saw his response. And
I saw both. Yeah.
He definitely acknowledged the fact that he saw my video, but the questions I asked definitely weren't answered.
To give him defense in one capacity, I'll give him actually defense in two capacities, because actually I will criticize you in one capacity because I did not like how you implied that his opinion has anything to do with the investment of nChain into his company. Go ahead. When Bitmain has invested more in his company, DCG has invested more in his company.
Right.
I thought that was a little dishonest, in my opinion.
Right.
And then the second thing I'll say is that I think the reason why there's disagreement between you two is because he's envisioning one chain emerging, you're not, right? So if he's saying it's a double spend, it's because he's saying this is assuming one chain emerges, and I'm operating under the assumption that I actually believe that that's what's going to happen, that one chain will emerge. I actually don't think you can protect a minority chain in this instance, no matter what you say. Even if you say after 100 blocks, there's nothing protecting it except for hash power. And if one side has majority hash power, there's nothing protecting the minority chain at all.
But I would like to just get back to the split, though, because I think we'll probably agree to disagree on this, is that I think you're envisioning more of two chains emerging from this. Connor's emerging one, and I guess that's the concern.
I don't see a scenario. I don't see a scenario where one chain doesn't emerge. That's what bothers me. There is no scenario in this, assuming that the SV side has majority hash rate, which from all that I can tell, from back in August, we've been saying this. It seems that the admission by Jihan and Hypo has been, they probably do have more hash rate than us on the BCH chain. I think what bothers me the most is I do not at all foresee two chains emerging as long as that is true. If that's not true, I still don't see two chains emerging because I don't see SV, the SV side of people implementing a hashing algorithm change. I don't see that happening. There's nothing at all that is implicating a chain split emerging from here, except for people telling, like somehow wallets are going to magically protect users.
Well, I mean, the chains are going to split regardless. It doesn't matter if somebody puts in a replay protection or not. Within 100 blocks, things start ending up in replay. Give it a month. They'll be two totally separate chains.
Why? There's no...
Okay. This is why. Okay, I talked about how when the UTXOs combine, they become split on each chain. How many businesses run SV and how many of them run ABC?
The majority of exchanges will be running ABC if their words are correct.
Almost everybody's running ABC.
Yep.
I could probably count the number of ones running SV on my hand. As soon as those UTXOs are split, the split transactions on everyone will be following ABC. Everyone. So as soon as the split starts happening, SV will not be compatible with any services outside of the ones that run SV, which are Handcash, CentB, and the rest. And when they send tokens to other wallets, they will not register them as received because they're on a totally different chain. So that is why, in my what I believe is the reason for all this push for split prevention is because it allows SV to remain usable in some capacity. Because without that, nothing's going to be usable. The longer the split goes on, the worse things become for SV because everything is running ABC. Wallets, exchanges, services, applications.
Okay, so there's two things here. There's two things. Number one, and this is where I believe Ryan is completely correct. If I send a transaction that does not include opmol, it is, if I'm not sending a block, for example, over 32 megs or anything like that, my transaction, in the case of I'm just sending a regular Bitcoin transaction, and I send it from Handcash, for example, to an ABC node, whether it's an exchange or whatever, it's a valid transaction, right? Yeah. So it's still going to be seen. So his no split side of things is just saying that there are transactions that are valid according to both rule sets. That would be transactions very generically that don't use opmol or they don't use opDSV, right?
What about new blocks?
What about them?
Do you blacklist them forever? For 2 years? How do the miners pay for their electricity? How do they buy new machines? Those coins are worthless.
In the case of the minority chain? Is that even?
No, in the case of split protection.
So in the case of, let's just say that there are now two competing rule sets, right? And let's say the fork happens, ABC finds a block. The next two blocks are SV. These aren't going to build on top of the ABC. Any over here aren't going to build on top of SV, right? So you are going to have, in this scenario, block rewards according to different rule sets. But then the question becomes, where are you going to sell your ABC block rewards?
Right.
Where are you going to sell your SV block rewards?
Right.
You're not going to sell them anywhere until one of two things. Either one, there is some actual protected status of replay protection across both chains that exchanges feel comfortable actually accepting one and the other. Or two, one chain emerges and the exchange feels comfortable accepting transactions from the one chain. Right?
Well, exchanges all feel comfortable with accepting both and splitting all coins right now. But so, I mean, do you expect the miners to just hoard all their coins that may or may not come out on the other end for a couple weeks, months, years?
It sounds like there's one side that is prepared to do that. Yeah. It sounds like another side may not be. Yeah. That's what the hash floor appears to be setting up. Yeah.
You don't think the game theory on that's going way out of line here? Who's willing to go without rule? Who's willing to hash without any profit, strictly burning money? That I guarantee the joint coin is not anywhere in the white paper. Nothing about that. That is not natural.
That is the white paper. The white paper describes one chain emerging, always.
Now, the white paper describes consensus among one chain.
Oh, this is my biggest. I hope you understand. This is very amicable. I'm very much enjoying this discussion. The entire white paper describes, again, the last sentence. Any needed rules,
right,
and incentives can be enforced with this consensus mechanism. Every single time it says the longest chain must always be considered the valid one. That might be a Satoshi quote outside of the white paper. Everything about the white paper and everything Satoshi ever said never, ever, ever describes multiple chains emerging. It's always one valid chain as described by the majority. Always. Always.
The white paper doesn't cover rule changes outside of Nakamoto or outside of the chain. It doesn't describe how to pick, I would say, the next chain, because it says specifically, you express your vote by building on blocks that you consider valid and reject, or not. It doesn't even say reject. It says, and ignoring blocks that you consider invalid. What happens if you ignore blocks that you consider invalid on a secondary chain? The chain continues. Nowhere does it say that you reject them, as in, orphaning or mining empty blocks. It says ignoring them. That's because it's not about two different rule sets. The entire white paper is based off of one rule set. There's no way in the white paper to choose the next rule set. You can pick the new rule set as in hard forking, but it doesn't say what to do with the second chain. I would say that it's assumed that everyone would have consensus to move over and it kind of die off, but it does not describe that mechanism.
So there's a few things there. Number one, it's Bitcoin, and I have it on the wall, so I will probably read. Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, not Bitcoin, multiple competing peer-to-peer electronic cash systems. The last two sentences cannot be, they aren't separate sentences. They are part of the conclusion of the white paper that says they vote with their CPU power, expressing their acceptance of valid blocks by working on extending them, and rejecting invalid blocks by refusing to work on them.
Right.
Any needed rules
and
incentives can be enforced with this consensus mechanism. It is this. I have no idea. I honestly cannot for the life of me understand. Someone told me it started with core. I have no idea. The first time I heard it recently was with Jonathan Tuman in the Q&A. I have no idea where this idea that there are multiple, that the white paper doesn't to talk about incompatible rule sets when it says specifically that the rule set itself is defined by the majority of hashing power. That is the white paper. That's what it's describing.
What do you think happens if you reject blocks by ignoring them?
I think that you set yourself up as the minority chain to be attacked by the majority chain. And that's why I'm very much opposed to people recommending.
That's not the white paper, though. Only ignoring them is.
So let's see. I'll pull up Satoshi Nakamoto on this because he said specifically that actually, let's see. I don't want to get it wrong. Go ahead. I would have to air a lot of disclaimers about the risks of using a minority version. This is a design where the majority version wins if there's any disagreement, and that can be pretty ugly for the minority version, and I'd rather not go into it. Of course, we wish he would have gone into it at this point, but he was very explicit that minority chains would suffer a lot of damage, or could potentially suffer a lot of damage at the hands of the majority.
I mean, it's obviously it's a risk, but that is not part of the consensus. He's saying that it is risky to go with the minority chain, but it never says that miners should attack it. I don't think nobody is saying you shouldn't be able to take the majority of hash rate and go on. People are saying that Nakamoto consensus does not mean that you destroy my investment and destroy my chain. That is not in the white paper. That is an adversarial act. Huge difference. Nakamoto consensus is is about picking the longest chain. It's not about destroying the smallest one. If you want to, I will admit there are several ways to read this. I really don't like it because it's like scripture. I don't know if you've ever seen, what's that movie with like the blind guy? It's like a post-apocalyptic world.
Blind guy.
Dadgum, this is gonna bug me. It's kind of like Eli or something. His name's Eli in the movie. But anyways, the main bad guy is like always carrying around a Bible, and he, you know, reads from the scriptures and then assassinate, you know, gets people killed and stuff. There's so few Satoshi writings that people will use them like that as scripture to push their agenda because they're not super clear. And as things get more complex, you're able to use these simple ideas to kind of make it sound with what you want. So I think Nakamoto consensus, what it's talking about there is A, about finding a valid, having consensus for a transaction history. Even if you believe that's not what it covers, it's obviously including that. B, it's very applicable to soft forks. Because you're in the same rule set, you're able to do just that. You know, build upon blocks and reject and not build off blocks that you don't agree with. And then it's questionable for 3. I would say that you can use it for that. It can be the miners can signal for an upgrade, and they can upgrade if they want, but it has absolutely nothing to do with performing a 51% attack on the minority chain. And I think that's what everyone has an issue with. It's not, okay, y'all want to do this, you know, it's y'all want to do this and then claim to bankrupt everybody else, you know?
Well, I think that's fine. I think because it's, you know, it's Chris Passia. He said, we can talk about the morality of 51% attacking the chain. It was Chris that said, he listed a bunch of fallacies that will die with the fork or whatever, or Craig Wright fallacies that will die. The first one he said was that non-mining nodes do not matter. That's, I think, just the point I'm trying to make. We can talk about the morality of doing it. That's fine. But the reality is that no matter what you do, you're not protected from that. Just like as Bitcoin Cash users, we're not protected from the BTC hash rate from, you know, 51% attacking us and double spending all of our coins, right? That there's nothing protecting us from doing that except for the natural incentives of the system that would hopefully say, hey, maybe we should hedge our bets and hope that this peer-to-peer electronic cash system works and not the 1 megabyte core system. But yeah, so again, just to reiterate it, I don't think the morality is in question. I think it's when you openly have the hypothetical majority in this circumstance saying we're not going to let the minority exist, and then you have exchanges saying we're going to go with the minority, and you have people saying we should split the coins, and you're fine. You're going to split your coins. There's going to be a split. It's going to be good. As the minority, when the majority is saying, hey, we're the majority, we can do what the hell we want, which is true, whether you like it or not, it's true. I guess that's where I'm at with it. And I think, I don't know.
And I think you would agree too that it is risky displaying your transactions on the minority chain, right?
Oh yes, I mean it's definitely risky, but just because talking about morality, like you said, if you want to upgrade the chain, that's fine, but it is different. Nakamoto consensus is different than attacking the minority chain. That is in addition. So that's one problem I have mostly is people going around saying, you know, Nakamoto consensus, and that's not what it's talking about. If you want to talk about hard forks, that's talking about, you know, implementing a rule change via a hard fork, but not, you know, destroying the minority. Off topic, but, you know, I think that there needs additional consensus mechanisms kind of need to be put in place. I don't know if y'all know about drive chain.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, things like that. I think in the future this will be a non-issue because, you know, whoever's in the minority will be able to live on through a drive chain, and everyone else can just go on their merry way with the majority fork.
I mean, that's actually where I disagree. I actually,
But it's skinned as like the base protocol is the largest chain, but everyone who wants to follow the consensus rules of the minority chain can if they want, and then you can switch back to the main chain at any point. So I don't see any problems with it, and all the transactions go back to the miners. It seems like the perfect answer to the problem. Because imagine if our Bitcoin Core did the bullshit that they did, but you were able to have a side chain with large blocks. I don't think there would have been a split. It allows for any disagreements over time to just be little side chains, and everybody stays on the same single proof of work forever. And I mean, the community splits.
Is that the same token? Because I'm not too familiar with Drive Chain. Would it be the same? Like, would you call it the same token and be exchanging the same token?
It would have, it's like a 1-to-1 ratio, a peg. The value would likely be a little bit different because it's kind of the process of pegging in and pegging out takes a little bit of time. So that would be priced in. So the sidechain token would likely be priced in a little bit less valuable than the main chain. But, all the transaction fees go to the miners. It's not like Liquid or Lightning. And allows anyone to have, if you want ring signatures, if you want zero knowledge proofs, if, whatever the heck you want. If SV1 and then you want an ABC sidechain, go for it. Nobody splits off. So to me, it's like the perfect answer.
Yeah.
Everyone can literally get what they want.
I don't know if that I couldn't speak to it. I think what this does point to, though, just overall, is I think it does point to the necessity to limit I think we need to get to the point where we aren't making consensus breaking changes.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I think everyone's in agreement with that.
I think so too.
When?
How do we get there and all that?
Right. Yeah. Real quick, I wanted to mention, and this might, because you mentioned that you think that the users don't ultimately matter. And I'm not talking about non-mining nodes, but what do you think about users? I mean, as a user, you have two options. You could hold or you can exit.
Yep.
And your choice of exiting has an effect on the market and who's mining for profit and what chain is going on. So ultimately, I mean, the market does choose, which chain moves on in the event of a chain split. But my question is, do you think that, let's go in a hypothetical scenario here, that SV wins, they absolutely crush everyone, they destroy everyone who split their tokens, all the exchange tokens, 50% of the tokens or more are gone, redistributed to the miners. I mean, do you think after all of that everyone is just going to switch over?
So I think I find it very interesting that you have, again, Chris has been very vocal, Chris Pasio. Yeah. He says he will not use BCH SV. I think he's calling it BSV.
Right.
He will not use that no matter what. I find that very interesting for a multitude of reasons. Number one, because of the exact reason that we talked about a little bit through this, that for the most part, most transactions are going to stay the same. For the most part, users, as much as like people involved in this understand the differences that are coming, most people just using Bitcoin, whether it's, let's say you're just using memo.cash, for example, you're not going to see a change. There's going to be no change really to what's going on. I think to answer your question, generally, you are right that users, of course, matter in the fact that if there's no users using a chain, there's really nothing that matters if a miner is mining it. I think that we're still, I think it doesn't actually matter if the whole of our BTC decides to abandon the SV chain, because I actually don't think we've gotten to any point of usability that really matters. I think that for the most part, number one, there's a lot of people, I think for the most part, this entire market is speculative. I don't think for the most part, anyone actually uses this stuff on a daily basis, which is unfortunate because I think we should be further than we are. But then to, I guess, just generally answer your question, I don't think actual real use comes until applications are built that allow that. And that would be in the case of like memo.cash. I think a lot of people that are politically minded see a use for uncensorable Twitter. I think we have done nothing but show Keyport for the past couple of weeks. I think the use case of microtransactions to pay content creators, I think that is something that you cannot do outside of Bitcoin. So am I really worried, to be honest with you? And am I really worried if our BTC stops using BCH because the SV rule set wins? I'm not, because I don't think any of those people are actually using Bitcoin on a daily basis to where it actually matters. So, I think
Bitcoin.com.
I think, I think it's actually, I think it'll be interesting. I don't think Roger opposes the SV rules. I've yet to actually see Roger oppose the SV rule set. That's what actually really bothered me about the video he came out with. He didn't actually oppose the SV rule set. He made an entire video about Craig Wright, which is fine. We can turn this into personalities, but I didn't see him at all oppose, I don't think raising the script limit, opcode limits from 201 to 500 is a bad idea. I don't think re-enabling opmol and op-l shift and r-shift is a bad idea. He didn't say any of that. I don't think he opposes the actual changes made by SV. I think that this is actually a purge, an attempted purge of Craig Wright is what this entire fork has turned into, for better or for worse. I also find it interesting, I'll say something else. I find it very interesting, the same, like Jonald Football. I've had awesome conversation with Jonald. He's done an incredible amount for Bitcoin Cash. I have nothing but respect for him. I think he's gone off a little bit on the deep end because of his personal feelings about Craig Wright. I think I find it very interesting that people are saying this is a permissionless system, but let's purge that Craig Wright guy out because fuck him. I find that all very interesting to me. And I'll say one last thing about permissionless, because I wanted to mention this during this conversation. This entire idea of permissionless, I will take the Craig Wright side of things. Permissionless is bullshit. Every transaction you make is permissioned by a miner. You are not doing anything without the permission of a miner. This idea that permissionless is a thing is absolutely ridiculous. Every miner could choose to reject any transactions from an IP if IP to IP transfers were put back in. Any miner can say, I'm going to blacklist an address. That is 100% within every right of a miner. That is the entire point of Bitcoin. Whether you like it or not, that's the way it works. If we're going to start saying that miners need to include every single transaction, which is what permissionless actually means, then you are making the exact same argument that people in America here make when they say we need universal health care because we should force doctors at at gunpoint to treat patients. That is the exact same argument to me that we should allow permissionlessness on Bitcoin.
Yeah, but I mean, a miner can blacklist something if they want, but if you got 10% of the hash power, you've got 10% of a chance of finding that block and a 10% chance of blacklisting that transaction, and the next one will pick it up.
Absolutely. That's the beauty of Bitcoin, right? Yeah.
So, I mean, in that aspect, it's permissionless because that one party can't really do anything about it. Now, what I find interesting is I think that things like that start break. I think that's purposeful. It's meant to be decentralized in the fact that there's supposed to be multiple block producers. Whenever you start getting a chain that has, at this point, 75% of the hash power in a cartel, and I mean cartel just as in a group of miners that all pretty much are doing the exact same thing. I mean, they've got agreements. Anyone can be a cartel, but in this case, they're perfectly aligned, 75% of them. That gets extremely dangerous because they can actually censor anything they want. They can stop a transaction if they want when they find a block, and if somebody else finds a block that they don't like, I mean, they have enough power to undo that and totally blacklist it. I think there are a couple things in Bitcoin that have to remain to actually be Bitcoin, in my opinion. And one of them is non-censorable transactions. I think that is an absolute must. If you can censor transactions, it's not Bitcoin.
But that was never what you're talking about is incentive. You're saying there's an incentive. For example, let's say, just hypothetically, let's just say, as a historical example, miners all decide as a cartel, for example, we're going to censor all transactions from Satoshi Dice, right? But Satoshi Dice maybe is moving 1,000 transactions per day. The reason why Bitcoin, this is in section 6 of the white paper, this is the incentive, right? There's an incentive to just take those transactions and put them in a block, whether you agree with them or not. So to say that Bitcoin allowed uncensorable transactions isn't entirely accurate. Bitcoin incentivizes transactions to, for the most part, be uncensorable. But by no means does Bitcoin guarantee uncensorable transactions.
The incentives are meant to ensure that uncensorable transactions. I guess the point I'm trying to make is if you have two block producers on AWS servers pushing blocks back and forth to each other, censoring transactions, that's no longer Bitcoin. There's a fundamental difference between the two camps, I believe. And if I'm putting words in your mouth, certainly let me know. But one side believes that, like me, for example, I used to be in the core camp. I moved over because I believed that the current block size was not necessary for decentralization, that we could handle much more than that very safely without affecting any of the incentives. I think there are a good amount of us that moved over because of that. I think there's a second camp who moved over because they don't really care about decentralization. They just want something that works. And I think it's been very vocal in the SV camp that the decentralized nature was more of a bootstrap, let's say, to get it working, and that it's not really a necessity in the system. It was just meant there to kind of facilitate the startup.
So
I don't really care about decentralization in the least.
I think the problem is the disagreement on what decentralization is, because I think in the case of, as a perfect example of this is, and this isn't necessarily reflected today in the ABC changes. This is reflected in, there seems to be this idea that we should optimize the software to allow greater competition at the base protocol level with respect to mining. And to maybe clarify what I mean by that, I think pre-consensus is an example of this. Omri has been an advocate of pre-consensus. Pre-consensus takes away a competitive aspect of the mining process, and it says, well, let's all agree on this first, and then now let's start competing, essentially. I think you're describing right now, I would argue actually, while Craig and Calvin are aligned, and again, we're going to disagree on this, they are competitors. They're money. This is what I think Bitcoin, the beauty of Bitcoin, greed is a hell of a drug. I think if there ever was an opportunity for Calvin to outcompete Craig, I think he would do it. And I think vice versa. Now you can maybe argue that they aren't doing that right now. Fine. But I don't want to get stuck in that. I want to move forward. I also think another thing that I think Craig Wright was actually responsible for bringing this into the lexicon of Bitcoin. And the more I've looked into it and talked about it with other people, it seems to be a great example is this idea of a Red Queen's game. Bitcoin does seem to me a Red Queen's game, where this idea that the person on top has to fight to stay on top. They can't, quote unquote, rest on their laurels, right? The idea of monopolies throughout all of human history are government granted. They're granted by a regulatory board. So this idea that because there's a cartel today, it'll always be a cartel for the remainder of the future of Bitcoin. The only way that occurs is by regulatory capture in some capacity. And the equivalency of that would be in Bitcoin would be changing the rules to say, to limit competitors from entering. And right now, Bitcoin has none of that. Bitcoin will not have any of that.
What do you think about the changes made to the Satoshi Vision implementation to take away anonymous mining and have persistent mining IDs.
So that keeps coming up. The only time I saw it come up was when Shatters said it could be an opt-in thing. I have never once seen it was going to be something required. It was just something where he said it could be opt-in for miners to take advantage of. I don't know where this idea that they're pushing for permission mining came from. I know that Shatters brought it up as something to opt in to help miners theoretically, where they could say, I'm a miner, this is my ID, you can therefore trust my block, for example, and that maybe gives me a little bit of an edge. By no means are they advocating for permission mining. And I think it's actually something that people already do today. I think the Coinbase the Coinbase tax is an example of that in some capacity.
Well, I would say that it's a change that has very bad consequences if pushed in the future. It's certainly not a good change. If you want to opt in and sign a Coinbase transaction right now, everyone's free to do it. It's already opt-in. But as soon as you start assigning persistent mining IDs, that's when things start getting scary, especially when your head thought leader talks about anonymity the way he does. And after the fact, that he was hiding hash in the anonymous part of Bitcoin Cash before it came out as BNG. So I see a lot of changes. I guess one reason is I see a lot of changes that have long-term effects that could definitely be taken advantage of. There are certain steps that are being taken that kind of point in directions like the permission mining. That is a very, very, very bad scenario. If you can get people to use persistent mining IDs, then you can start whitelisting and blacklisting based off of IDs instead of off of rule sets. I think that's super dangerous, especially whenever your chain is 75% of the mining hash powers from one or two people that are aligned.
I don't disagree with you at all, but I haven't seen it's been kind of repeated as fact that they're pushing for it. All I saw was one Twitter post from Shatters that said it could be an opt-in thing for miners. I haven't seen them push that, but I agree with you. I don't think that should be forced upon miners whatsoever. Yeah, completely agree. And then I will say, because again, I like to the anonymity thing from Craig. I have actually, it's something that I've thought about a lot because it's interesting to me. And I think I think it's a very knee-jerk reaction to say that his opinion on that is actually bad or wrong. I think he made, in my opinion, some interesting points that, and the reason why I took him seriously actually was after I'd followed a journalist who was looking at some of the Snowden leaks outside of just what was popularized by, what was actually popularized at the time was like less than 1% of what he had leaked. The NSA is one of the biggest proponents of people using Tor because it hides their own activity. So I understand people's knee-jerk reaction to be like, oh, Craig hates privacy and anonymity or whatever, but he makes a very fine distinction between privacy and anonymity. I don't think it's something to dismiss out of hand. I think it's a good debate. I don't necessarily agree with him, but it made me think more about what he was talking about. Yeah.
I think it's very spicy considering kind of some of the things that are going on. Like, for instance, you can talk trash about anonymity and how it's the veil of cowards, or however he phrased it.
Lisa?
Anonymity is something like that. It had something to do with cowards and thieves, but there's a whole lot of N-chain itself steeped in complete anonymity and mystery. For instance, do y'all know how much of N-chain and how many of the patents, intellectual property, and how much of N-chain's investments that Craig has access to?
I would distinct, though, this is just distinction in privacy. Privacy and anonymity are two things, right? So I would agree that it's private. It doesn't necessarily mean it's anonymous, but no, I don't know much about, I have no idea. I know the number of patents because he says it, but that's right. About it. Yeah.
He also says they're his, and the mining and 1,000 or so patents on the blockchain, all owned by nChain, and no one knows who owns nChain. Completely anonymous. The veil of cowards. So I find it pretty fresh whenever things like that are totally steeped in mystery, and then at the same time they're all freaking out because we don't know how much or exactly where ABC's funding is coming from. But funding is a very large, it's very different than who directly owns the actual patents, investments, who employs Craig,
Again, though, I would make the distinction: privacy and anonymity are two different things. All because we don't know doesn't mean that it's anonymous to. I'm sure some government has some idea of who is the top shareholder of nChain or whatever else. I don't think it's purely anonymous, but I think the patent thing, it's a great debate. I think patents has been one of the most interesting discussions I've had with people, just even outside of Bitcoin. I have a lot of friends who are libertarians who are pro-patents. I have a lot of friends who are libertarians that are anti-patents. I have a lot of friends that are, anywhere in between there. I think the patents are interesting. I think for anyone to think that, there's two sides. I think the MasterCard and, people are going to patent. So I understand the desire to patent, but I agree with you. Of course, there's a risk involved with, we don't know what they have patents on or anything like that. So I empathize with that viewpoint.
Well, the patents are public, but the people that own them, I find it just very risky to not know who owns all of that. I think it's a huge hole. I'd encourage you to try to follow the chain of funding. It's very strange.
If you have information, I'll look at it. I have no idea. I don't know.
Right. There's just not much out there. It's just a chain of shells upon shells. But I had before I took it down. You ever see that episode of Always Sunny in Philadelphia where Charlie's got like all the stuff on the walls? He's talking about Pepe Sylvia. That was like my wall, trying to find it. But
the mail. We're gonna check the mail.
Yeah, it's Pepe Sylvia. But anyways, kind of to go on from that.
Yeah.
So about the actual hash war. So what are y'all kind of expecting?
We've said from August. Again, I was going to make a bet with Jonald, one Bitcoin bet. I never did it. He probably won't take me up on it now. That I said way back in, it must have been September, that SV would win. When I saw Jihan's tweets, we did an episode about this a while ago. Jihan and Hypo's tweets from the beginning seemed to me to be an admission that they didn't have the hash rate. I don't think two chains will merge just because I think the majority chain, assuming it is SV, has advertised very explicitly a minority chain will not be allowed to exist. So that's what I think will happen, but I could be wrong. I don't know.
Right. Hmm.
And
I have no insider information or anything as far as like, what to expect. It's all in the dark. But one thing I've been kind of thinking about is, what happens if ABC actually does end up implementing like a proof of work change? Just because as far as, we've never seen a hash war. We've never seen a full-on 51% of any chain worth its salt. But we've never seen a proof of work change of any significance. I guess we saw Monero, but that wasn't because of adversarial reasons. That was planned ahead. I'm talking about emergency proof of work change. I'm interested to see if there, what exchanges do, what ticker is assigned, if it can be kept, if there was a proof of work change.
I think that's wholly within the right. I have no problem with them doing it. I would be a little upset. Just like I really want to play out. You know what I mean?
Right.
And again, we've said from the beginning, if ABC won the hash war, fine. All we've argued about, whether obviously we have opinions, and we started to be a little more vocal with our opinion recently. But at least from my side, I have from the very beginning said I just want to stop this. Like I want to see the white paper as I view it play out. I want to see miners putting, like, everyone framed this as an ABC versus SV fork. It's technically not. It is miners who support the ABC rule set versus miners that support the SV rule set. And I would love to see them hash it out and put, like, challenge their investment and put the rule set they want in. So I would be very upset if they changed the hashing algorithm just for that reason, because I think that I think the entire cryptocurrency world is watching what happens to us on Thursday. Mm-hmm. And I think if it does play out where the majority chain wins and exchanges are forced to go on with the majority chain, I think it's going to make a lot of people rethink how this stuff works. And I think that's a big opportunity for us to show, like, this is what it's all about. And by the way, if you're a chain with very little hashing algorithm or very little hashing power, you might want to watch out. That's all,
Yeah, if that happened, I imagine you'd see like a huge retractment of altcoins into BTC almost immediately.
Yep, I think so too.
And I think immediately. One thing is, if I'm just going to assume here that most of the hash power, assuming SV wins, is not going to be from miners that are distributed. Almost entirely going to be from CoinGeek and nChain. We could see that they've got enough right now to do it if nothing moved. If the other miners didn't have an invested interest in Bitcoin Cash at that point, if it was SV, I would be curious to see if you'd have an immediate hash war between Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin without the invested interest as a backup. Yeah. I think there's a chance that if SV wins, Bitcoin, all those pissed off miners would probably just go and. So I'd be interested to see if that happens.
I think so too. I think it was actually it was Joseph von Perling a while back. I respect him a lot. He said, what did he say? He said, this is like way back when it was like right in August. He said, I don't know. He was talking about the theoretical hash war at that point. He said bonus points for flipping. Because I actually think that the reason why I want this to happen so bad is I think this does provoke a lot of BTC miners to start maybe thinking instead of just like none of them had to think with the BCH fork. I don't fault how that stuff went down. I think it was fine, but like no one had to risk money in the BCH fork. The DAA, the EDA at the time made sure of that. So
right.
But
real quick question, because I have to ask it all the time. It's not extremely relevant to what we just said. Why? Let's back to the white paper when you say all rule changes can be implemented in this manner. Why do y'all consider Bitcoin Cash to be Bitcoin?
Yeah, this always comes up.
Yeah, I know it's a common question, but I like to see how people like kind of answer, like why if Nakamoto consensus is in fact what you believe, and they can implement all rule changes, a rule change of confiscating coins of people that disagree with the largest miners, if that's allowed, and then certainly something like segregated signatures are way less controversial than that. Why is Bitcoin not BTC? The miners did allow SegWit. The actual Nakamoto consensus allowed it, and then Bitcoin Cash in that manner would be an imposter because they implemented replay protection and went against Nakamoto consensus.
We talked about this. I think I'll answer your question two ways. Number one, and the reason why I will agree with you. It's a very valid criticism to say, therefore you can't say BCH is Bitcoin. I will say two things. Number one, when I go down the street and I introduce people to Bitcoin, and if you get a couple drinks from me, I will just hand out Bitcoin at the bar. It's a very bad habit. I'm not telling people this is like a fork that happened like one time because we were arguing over block size, like what else. It's like, to me, it's just easier to be like, no, this is like Bitcoin. This is what everyone's used to with Bitcoin. So in just the vernacular, I call it Bitcoin because it's what Bitcoin always was. The ability just to send electronic cash cheaply. I will then put the other disclaimer, and this is can be criticized, I think, very fairly. Because this isn't described in the white paper, it's not described by Satoshi. This is why, again, I think it can be criticized fairly. But I think it's a valid argument. Is that the EDA itself, the emergency difficulty adjustment, and the replay protection completely removed the incentive model of choosing valid rule sets. It was just, hey, this thing's going to exist no matter whether you want it to or not. And like, even if one person is mining it, it's going to exist because we put this mechanism in to do it. I don't think there was any incentive for a miner to risk anything in that fork, because why would you? And then I'll also say that Nakamoto consensus hasn't played out with BCH. If Nakamoto consensus, while there's all these weird stipulations about difficulty adjustments, no miner has attacked BCH. And there's a reason for that, I think. I think the incentives are still intact, where there's a reason why BCH hasn't been attacked by a BTC miner. And the BTC mining dwarfs it by, 9x, right? So, but yeah, I think it's a valid, everyone brings it up. It's a valid criticism that if I'm going to make this line of argument, therefore I can't say BCH is Bitcoin. And that's fine. I make sure I clarify to people that are actually clued in that I'm talking about Bitcoin Cash, but I also think it's the same argument of like 99% of the people around me don't even know what Bitcoin is. So I'm not going to be like, there was this like argument over block size, which is like how many transactions. It's just like, no one cares. So,
right.
But I agree with you. I will just amicably say that totally valid.
Right. Oh, good. Because I'm always interested how people, I don't know. Looking back, because previously I've had some beliefs on the other side. To me, this has kind of opened my eyes to see why some of the people in Core kind of disagreed with the fork. Not necessarily that it was wrong, but I can see how it would upset you, and see why certain aspects of it are kind of, I don't know, just a little bit odd, kind of on the other side of things right now, and kind of putting things in perspective.
I think the only thing I would say to that just generally is that, and no one can speak about what ifs, but if last August miners were forced, let's just hypothetically say at gunpoint, to choose between the 8 megabyte chain or 1 megabyte with SegWit, I think it's quite obvious which chain the miners would have picked, and businesses and whoever else. But that wasn't allowed to happen, which again, I don't blame. Like, I know Craig blames Jihan for that. I don't know anything about what happened there. I think Omri, again, the problem is turn of personality. I respect ABC. I think that they're the reason why Bitcoin Cash is, exists and all that kind of stuff. I just don't, I don't think that they own Bitcoin Cash. I don't think that, I think the miners choose. And let's be honest, the ABC are employed by miners. There are miners that wanted ABC's changes. And there are miners that didn't, and those miners chose to develop another client, and now we're going to see what happens. And I think that's how, if we're going to call ourselves any kind of semblance of Bitcoin, the governance model has to work out that way. But
right. I guess my thing, my position is this. I believe that ultimately the users do pick what's Bitcoin because they vote with their price action. Bitcoin is kind of a social construct of what Bitcoin is. So for me, this fork says, do we all socially agree that the miners pick? Is that really the way that consensus is now going to work on for Bitcoin Cash? And if that's the case, then that's the case. But I don't think that that's fully decided yet. So I'm very interested to see if that's what happens, and that's the future of Bitcoin Cash. Because if SV does win this time, I think that will be the new standard forever. I think that's the deciding factor.
Yeah.
So I'm ultimately just ready for it to get over with, because I think as who was it that it was either Emil or Chris Pacia that said it, that this is where we kind of define what Bitcoin Cash actually is.
Yep. I agree.
So looking
would you support Bitcoin Cash if SV went?
I will. I've actually put a lot of thought into it. My position is I left Bitcoin Core because they kind of suck, and don't really match with my ideals. SV doesn't either. So what I guess I'm going to do is just support SV is like the main chain, and probably be a little bit less critical of core itself. But I think people like myself and a lot of people who want something different are going to have to look for altcoins for a little bit and then just kind of support their main chain. But I don't know. I guess I'm going to kind of split my attention between SV and somewhere where my ideals are kind of matched. So I think I will support SV, especially if they keep the BCH ticker. I mean, then it's Bitcoin Cash, but I will be slightly disappointed.
I think one thing we didn't even talk about, but I know we've gone a while here, so I don't want to keep us all here, but I think the other argument that has to be made is the idea of sound money. Like, I think that's why we're all here. I think it doesn't, in a weird way, I actually don't think it gets talked about enough. That, like, we can talk about all these technical things all we want, but at the root of why Bitcoin was created, it was created for sound money.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, well, that may not have been the white paper. That was, again, one of Satoshi's first words, really, was like, the central banks inflate the currency at will. So that, I think, is, I think regardless of where people fall on these two things, like, if you're here for sound money, there's no reason to think that under either rule set, sound money is threatened. Except I will say, and this is why I think it's important. I didn't know whether to believe Craig, but I think Roger's admission, Roger seems to have put thought into it and been like, there might be legal problems, but I don't care because I don't I stand against governments enforcing this anyway. I actually have a very hard time accepting that we're going to accept some kind of legally questionable thing and just hope governments just don't act on that and shut down miners, for example. And I've done a little bit of research into this. This actually came up with social media sites of this is Craig saying. Craig says that you're choosing between common carriers and publishers, essentially, if you do something like DSV, because you either become a validator of the contract or you just become a common carrier of the contract if you're using something like Raven signatures or something inside of script. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I have no idea how true that is, but the reason why I'm saying this is because when I saw Roger's video, he seemed to just accept this as fact. That threatens sound money. If governments can hold miners responsible as something different under the law, which the reason why I'm bringing this up is you look at social media sites, they actually ran this exact same issue. Facebook and Twitter and all these companies were actually, I think it was in the UK, where it was legally questionable whether they're cited as common carriers or publishers of content. And if they were publishers, they became responsible for every single thing put on by users. I think these are interesting questions. I don't hear anybody talking about the legal stuff around this. And
I find the legal stuff incredibly boring because it always ends up being a bunch of nothing.
Yeah.
I think.
But what if it could be something though?
That's
I don't know. That's
I mean, it never has been, and like I said, Craig's kind of repeatedly talked about, bringing segregated people who validate segregated signatures under some law, but it's been there for a year, nothing's happened. I don't believe it will. I think there are a lot of. I think ultimately, there are Craig and Calvin are both from Bodog, and they like to bluff a bit. I think this is kind of a bit of a game, and bluffing is fair game. But I think I think it's a bluff, and I'll call it.
I also think I will play a little bit. I think they're both from Bodog, and I think they've seen how fine the law can crush you if you're not very closely within the law. So
yeah, they've both been quite crushed at some point by. I will. So I do want to know, like, your definition. What makes something sound money?
For me, it would be. I think the properties that was it Aristotle that defines. I think right. So divisible. So the properties of good money would be divisible. What else did he say? God, divisible, transferable, and whatever the last one was. But that would be what is good money. I should know that. I've talked about it a lot. That would be good money, but I think what sound money would be unchanging, right? So the problem with money in the United States, for example, is that, and if you talk to some people, I've talked to people who like defend quantitative easing, like this is the greatest system ever. It's the most scientific, foolproof system ever. But in the United States, obviously the Fed comes out with interest rates that we just all accept, and it's like we all just like crowd around CNBC and we're like, oh yep, that makes sense. The Fed came out with this number and it's all good. To me, sound money is unchanging, deflationary. I think the deflationary aspect of Bitcoin is one of the most important things. And maybe along that line, I'll again bring it back to something that's been hammered home about like criticisms of SB on the subreddit that everyone visits these days. Everyone goes, well, Craig said now he's going to steal coins, right? So that's the new thing, is that Craig's going to steal coins, and then they've said he's going to steal Satoshi's coins with that, and that's the thing. But he made a very valid point in his. Now I'm not going to talk about what he said he was going to recover op false things. That's whatever. We can have a whole conversation about that. Something everyone missed in that entire article was his general point that at some point in the future, like treasure hunting, like digging for gold, there's an incentive for miners to find hash collisions on coins that are quote unquote lost. And that's always been his argument against the burning. Everyone goes, I should have the right to burn. The burning thing became an entire layer of doublespeak, because I know I'm getting away from your question, but sorry. But everyone goes, I should be allowed to burn. I should be free to burn. This is permissionless, blah, blah, blah. Craig never said, don't burn your coins. He said, the way that Omni was burning coins was stupid, because you're saying that there's three scenarios. And again, I credit Joseph von Perling for this analogy. I thought he had a brilliant analogy. He said there's three scenarios. Number one, or maybe four. Number one, everything's fine, that the key is never found. No, sorry, it's not a scenario. There's three scenarios. Number one, we take these people at their word, and the key, no one holds the key, but you now create buried treasure for a miner in the future. Okay, that is scenario number one. And now you have, at some point in the future, a large quantity of coins that come back into circulation into the economy, disrupting the future economy. Number two, you have a captain riding a ship, and they say, okay, throw your gold overboard right here, everything's safe, assuming that the captain didn't put you over like an uncharted reef, right, where they can now dig under and grab the coins. That would be the scenario where someone has the private key. I'm not saying it's true. Then the third scenario is, is any captain that says, trust me, this is a good spot to throw your gold overboard, are they actually trustworthy? A good captain would say, I'm not sure if this is the best way to do it, but it's the best thing we have right now. And no one took Craig's actual, I think Craig is a bad communicating, I think he's bad at communicating sometimes, but I thought he made a point that never went addressed, which was that the whole burning thing, he wasn't necessarily saying, I mean, I think he's since gone on Twitter and been like, burning is bad and whatever else. He made a very good point that these coins are not gone. Whether you like it or not, you're either creating, number one, an incentive in the future to mine those coins, which is exactly what he just put in his blog post about the op false stuff. Sorry. The reason why I brought this is because the sound money thing, everyone's going, Craig wants to steal your coins and blah, 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 blah. It's like he's just stating a reality. This is what miners are going to do in the future. And we can have a discussion about the op false thing. That's right. I think that's a moral quandary, but sure.
Yeah, I was saying I previously, I would have jumped on the whole like stealing Satoshi's coin things, but I mean, I think there's a valid argument that if you don't, if the keys are gone and the address format stays the same, it might be 100 years or 200 years in the future. Eventually, somebody's going to crack that baby. It's a valid argument. So can't say too much about that. I'm questioning why he even posted it, because it seems kind of obvious that like if they're lost, nobody's going to update the wallet. But then again, it would really suck if somebody just didn't upgrade their software.
I thought it was a very politically questionable move at the current time.
I mean, it almost seemed like I think he said that just to rile someone up, because it seems obvious.
Yep.
And I think it's just going along the lines, and like you said, the alt false, which I guess is the DSV splitting argument that he's making, or is that something else?
I don't know. I skimmed that article. I thought he was saying something about how he was going to start recirculating op false coins, which would be one way of burning. I don't know. I really don't know. But
right.
That became an issue.
Maybe he's talking about the opcode splitting and redistribution, because I don't think that is technically even possible, because as many people have pointed out, I don't think anyone's going to run that software. I don't think you're going to have enough consensus to actually do it. Nobody in their right mind would actually agree to that. But all the same, it seems that is absolutely nuts to me. To put a change like that, saying if you use this opcode that we don't agree with, that we'll take your coins. It seems to go against the very nature of Bitcoin and sound money.
I think we'll go in circles on this one.
Yeah.
I agree, but I want to make one last point that I think I think he could be just making. If I were theoretically someone who wanted to hammer home the consensus mechanism of one chain emerges out of majority hash rate voting, this would be one way of hammering that home and saying, you can want a minority chain all you want. We will not allow it to exist. It is not secure. Therefore, it does not solve the double spending problem, which is what Bitcoin set out to solve with the white paper. That's all I'll say about it.
Right.
But yeah, I think we'll,
Right. So yeah. I guess going in circles there. Just a couple guesses, just because I'm curious about y'all's opinions. If you were to say from the 15th onwards, how long do you think it's going to last? Do you think it's going to be quite obvious and somebody's going to be the obvious victor and then someone just gives up, or do you think it's going to take days, weeks, months? I think Craig said he'd go 2 to 5 years.
I think
if it goes longer than a week, I could see this going out for a couple months.
If it goes out for a week, I don't think that's the thing about like the whole no split narrative is like, if you say there's no split, but like it can go on for years, like at what point is it just like, oh, there's, we're still in a hash battle. And what point is it just
in that scenario, a lot of people lose money. And I think that's going to be where the people let go of whatever side they're kind of facing. Is at what point do they lose enough money?
Yeah. Well, the investors too. Like if it goes on for, like you said, like a week, like people are just going to start selling like crazy.
If they can sell. That's the real question. Honestly,
I guess that's what Craig was talking about with Roger. I guess if you. How would you do that? I guess if you didn't allow, I guess if you left the blocks empty on the, I don't know how you do that, honestly.
Well, you just make the risk so high that exchanges refuse to trade. That's all it has to do. And
yeah,
I think again, a lot of people criticize Craig. I hate just sitting here defending Craig, but I think he's very misunderstood when he communicates. I think he's usually actually correct. I just think he communicates it poorly. When he said sell, I suggest you sell. Everyone goes, oh, look at Craig. He's advocating you use fiat. He's telling you, I'm prepared to make sure that if you don't sell now, you won't be able to sell for 2 years, is what he was getting, right?
That's what I read from it.
But I think it's actually 50-50 that this lasts less than an hour. It's either
that's kind of what I think. I think it's going to be pretty instant. Like, nobody's going to. I mean, if it's obvious, like, why lose money? Yeah. However, I think if Craig and them are the minority, I don't think they're going to give up. I think it's only going to be the other way. I think they'll keep on and then like have their own chain, and then it'll be like this. It'll be like the Bitcoin Cash people yelling at Bitcoin saying, we're Bitcoin or, Bitcoin. And I think you're going to have the exact same thing, like one chain over.
I don't disagree with you, but I think the difference will be that neither chain will be usable until they give up. I wholeheartedly believe that. I don't.
Honestly, I've kind of positioned myself for that to happen.
And that's why we should all support Ryan's initiative to let us all continue to use non-split transactions until this resolved. Which is why I think the criticisms of him are actually a little. I think he's just talking about how do I, as a business, stay in operation during this time, and I think I don't think he has any malicious. I know he's aligned with the SV side, but I think he makes a very good point that we can still operate as cash while this is going on. And but I understand that there is if you think that two chains can emerge out of this, then I can see why you would take issue with what he said. But
right. Yeah, it's really a time issue here, because he, like Ryan said 2 years and Craig said 5 years. It's, to me, that's why I said 100 blocks, because the mining new block rewards are just an issue. You know, it's not just Jihan or ABC versus CoinGeek and everyone else. These are other miners as well, and everyone's just going to switch over to the BTC chain. I mean, my greatest fear here is that BCH just dies, and I think Craig's prepared for that. I don't think we have 2 years of no trade, because, I mean, I've talked a lot of crap about Lightning in the past, but I use it every day. I try to keep up with, you know, how things are going and how things and other coins. We don't have 2 years. Bitcoin Cash will die.
Yeah, I don't know.
But that's just speculation. So
Sure.
I guess
I think if miners do go to BTC, then SV wins, because the only people willing to lose money are like you said. I think there's two entities willing to lose money on this, and I credit Vin Armani, who I thought was talking a lot of nonsense for a while, and then he all of a sudden was like, "Oh shit, I think I see what's about to happen." And
yeah.
So I do credit him with I think seeing the light as to, and not that I don't care what side he's on. It's just I think he was was like, "Oh shit." I think only one chain can safely emerge from this. But anyway, that's my opinion. So
yeah, I've been watching Vin's tweets. It's kind of a strange transition from his YouTube videos last week to like what he's tweeting now. I think he's on like some strategy. He's probably, he saw what Krawitz is doing. He's like, you know, I'm a follow Krawitz. I'm a be Bombadil on this one. Can't lose if you're above the fork.
I think you're right. Yeah.
So, which most of us should probably follow at some point. I think Krawitz is kind of on point on most of what he says.
I think so too.
Especially if you want to get to the center of the network.
I think, I don't know, is there anything else we wanted to cover? I think
we covered a lot of topics. We are kind of getting to the area where we keep overlapping.
Yeah,
with going in circles on some things, and I think we'll agree to disagree on a lot of different things.
One more question that I do want to ask. If it's just N-Chain and CoinGeek on the SV chain, like, is that gonna worry y'all? I see like kind of differing opinions on if sustaining over 51% of the hash. Like, as long as they don't act, let's assume that nothing malicious is done, is it going to be worrisome if there are really just two block producers?
I think that this is a false. I don't believe that there are two. SV pool it may not be thousands of miners, it's individual miners. SV pool is a separate pool. Whether everyone wants to believe it or not, it is. Craig has no reason to set up his own pool. He could just put it behind BMG. Okay.
Didn't BMG like lose an equal proportion of hash rate as that the SV pool gained?
I'll be open to looking at evidence for that, but I have no idea. Then the other thing I would say is that I mean there are other.
I'd also argue that I think Bitcoin.com's pool went down a little bit as the SV pool rose a little bit as well.
When they made that announcement, that seemed to actually. I did notice that, but again, it's anecdotal. But yeah, Corey, you're right.
Correlation's not causation. So.
When Bitcoin.com came out and said they were going to support the ABC chain, I remember specifically it went from 10% to about 6%, and then SV went up about 4%. But again, yeah, like you said, correlation is not causation. But I found that a little curious. I don't know.
We need some persistent mining IDs to really know what's going on.
You're right. Yeah.
But I guess we'll see come Thursday. Do y'all know what time roughly it's the first block will be mined that's split?
It's around noon U.S. time, Central Eastern. I think
Like Eastern, noon Eastern, but I think it changes a little bit there.
Yeah, variance.
the decidance it's on some weird. I meant to look into it. Magnetic something. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? They say okay. The fork is like based on some term called magnetic something. I don't know. I gotta look it up. But
yeah, I have no clue. Sounds like way too complicated.
That's what I thought.
Like I prefer just like this block is going to be split.
Yeah, it's a little easier. But
so, do y'all expect kind of like it to go on business as usual for a little bit, or it's just like snap, bam, fight? Or I think it's.
I hope it's fight off the bat.
Yeah, I think.
I bought tickets for this long ago. I'm
yeah. I need to. I know that y'all mentioned a little bit of a live stream and kind of if I wanted to go on, but depending on the time, I might just do it a large part of the day. I'd be interested to kind of capture my reaction of what happens. Everybody's. I think everyone should kind of do that.
Cool. Yeah. I think too. We should definitely talk about. I know on Saturday, if you are interested, we're really. Publicly, I should show you Keyport. I think you should put your stuff in Keyport. I think it's awesome. I think the whole concept is amazing. I think we're going to try and work with them to do some kind of live stream on both Thursday and Saturday. So I think on Saturday you mentioned you're interested. So
yeah, definitely. Thursday might be tough, but Saturday.
No yeah. Cool, man. Well, this is a good conversation. Right. I appreciate us doing it. I'm sorry that my words were what sparked it, but
oh no, I'm glad it happened. I thought it was funny, just a nice little reason to talk. So
I thought it was a great discussion actually, both sides.
Yeah,
obviously, I lean more on Connor's side, but I don't know. I don't want to be,
right.
You got a home,
but I see your points on your side too, and it. I think Thursday will be a great learning experience for like you said, I think this is going to be a great educational experience for what's to come in the next couple of years.
Right. Yeah.
Cryptocurrencies all over. And I think that's why so many people are looking at the altcoin market, or the altcoin market's looking at Bitcoin Cash and what will happen.
You can almost view Bitcoin Cash as like the sacrificial lamb. It's taking all the money for everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just glad that everyone's looking at us. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I've been looking at it and I just cannot believe that we have not dipped in price. And I'm looking online. Most people, and it might be because of like videos like mine, but people still widely believe that it's just going to be another airdrop. Which I need to make a video tomorrow, just being like, because that was just like me trying to explain what happens, without replay protection, not exactly what's going to happen when you put mining and kind of adversarial roles to that. But I think the general public is just going to be like, what the heck's going on? I thought I was going to get 2 tokens immediately.
You make that video.
I think that's exactly why the price isn't I think that's why the price has kind of gone up a couple past weeks.
Yeah.
And up to that point. But I think you're exactly right. I think everyone thinks that this is going to be like a normal fork, and everyone seems to buy in when there's news about an upcoming fork happening too, because they think, 2 tokens. So
yeah, I've been watching a couple of videos from other YouTubers, just, making general videos on it. And, they all have titles like double your Bitcoin Cash on the 15th and like that. It's like, somebody needs to come out with a video that's just like, here's the shit show that could go down on the 15th.
The crypto YouTube quote unquote community is a pile of shit. So I appreciate you for being a diamond in the rough for sure. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I need to make more videos. It's hard in the bear market, but I enjoy it.
Cool.
So, but yeah, it was nice talking to y'all and everything. So
we'll be in touch, I'm sure. But I look forward to seeing what happens. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll have to do this again like afterwards. Just
Yeah,
like
perfect.
hard fork recap.
That sounds good.
What happens.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm gonna quit the recording.